You're listening to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute, a podcast where we discuss both the hobby and business sides of collecting. I'm your host, Mike Sommer, and I want to help you buy, sell, and trade your way into a collection you'll love. Well, hello everybody. It's time for another episode of the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute, and today we've got another edition of Better Know a Collector. And today's collector is the hobby legend Tanner Jones. And in our conversation, we talk a little bit about Tanner's book, Confessions of a Baseball Card Addict. We talk about his podcast. We talk about what it's like to be focused on a particular collecting goal. And we talk a lot about his faith and how that influences his collecting journey. So I'm excited that you get to be a part of that conversation, and we'll get right into it after this quick break. StarStock is a new trading card marketplace which is preparing to go live in April. Their goal is to be a faster and cheaper solution to sell cards, and they're looking for sellers who want to be some of the first to have their cards available for sale at launch. I'm going to be testing the platform with my own submission. They're offering a 5% sales commission with no other submission or processing fees. You send in your cards and they do all the work. Cards are insured and stored in a vault, and you can have your cards shipped to you at any time. You'll be able to buy, store, or flip cards at the push of a button. If you're interested in learning more about getting involved as a seller and getting your cards onto the site for launch, contact Mike Kuchera via email at mike@starstock.com. They're looking for sellers who have rookie and prospect cards of current players for the major sports. For more details, contact Mike Kuchera at mike@starstock.com or go to www.starstock.com. All right, welcome back from this break, and today I've got another guest with us on the line. He is an author, he is a podcaster, he is a recovering super collector. He is Tanner Jones. Tanner, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm glad we're getting a chance to finally connect after interacting online for the last couple of years. I'm glad we get a chance to connect. If you follow Tanner at all online, you will see that his collecting journey seems to revolve around Jose Canseco, faith, family, and memes. Tanner, is there anything else?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, well, I don't know. I love comic books and Transformers and, various television shows. So I have a lot of interest, but I'm just not really too terribly that deep of a person, I guess, though.
Well, there you go. I know those are some of your favorite things that I enjoy reading about. I first found you on the Blowout forums a couple of years ago, and then became aware of your book, that you kind of chronicled your journey as a Jose Canseco super collector, and you titled that Confessions of a Baseball Card Addict. What prompted you to write that book?
Well, I've been wanting to write a book forever. It was just like a bucket list thing, and a number of years ago, I actually wrote a kind of a book that I used more as like a sales tool or marketing tool for business. And because I've been doing websites, as my own thing for about 20 years now. And I just wasn't too passionate about writing about it. So then I said, well, gosh, why don't I talk about baseball cards, in a book? So I did that, and just the pages just kind of wrote themselves. It's so easy to get the content down. As a matter of fact, the book ended up being, I think, probably 182, 187 pages, something like that. I actually, before I published it, it was up to like 215 pages. So I think I cut out about 40 pages because I just love rambling about cardboard so much.
Did you have anybody working with you to kind of formally edit it, or was it all pretty much self-edited, self-published?
Yeah, I actually had my wife Holly read through it a few times, and I think I might have had my friend Kristen read through it, if I remember correctly. I'm kind of fuzzy on that, but I know my mom did also. She read through it. So, not like, there were no like, paid professional, so to speak, to do it. It was mainly just us. And I remember going through probably 3 or 4 iterations of it when I was finished, say, oh, I'm finally done. I'm going to take this to the presses, but, probably better get a copy first just to make sure, get the copy. And then I find something's wrong. I'm like, dang it. And so that happened 2, 3, 4 times. And, so finally, so you'd be hard pressed to find many errors. Surely there's going to be some in there because it was my thing. It wasn't like, some professional, deal that's published, but yeah, it was fun.
A lot of the book talked about what got you into cards back when you were a kid, and it chronicled your Jose Canseco super collection process of both building that and then ultimately the decision to sell it. But faith played a big role in that process, and faith is something that definitely played a prominent role in the book. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, in addition to the impact on the Jose Canseco collection, how has your faith influenced your hobby?
I appreciate that question because, in my opinion, that's going to be the best question, the biggest question that anybody ever asks me when it comes to this sort of thing. So my faith is obviously it's rooted in Jesus Christ as my Savior. And that basically covers everything. Like that's first and foremost the most important thing to me. And that's gonna like really kind of be like nails on chalkboard to a lot of folks that are out there listening. I get it. I completely understand. You go to Amazon and you look at my reviews. There's a lot of 4 and 5 stars, but there's even a few 1 and 2 stars. And the 1 and 2 star ratings are those guys that said, this guy talks about God too much, and he talks about religion and this, that, and the other. But it's just, that's my life, and not trying to ram it down anybody's throat. But for those who ask, here's my answer. Faith in God is kind of what drives me. And so the way that it influences my collecting is, what you really have to do is you have to look in the Bible and see what God calls his believers to do. And God calls his believers to make disciples of the nations, to glorify him. And so a lot of people don't really understand this. So I'm just kind of trying to explain, try to walk you through this for your listeners to hopefully better understand the mind of somebody that's a Christ follower, that identifies as somebody that's a follower of Jesus. Is, whenever you get into something, anything in your life whatsoever, whether it be, work, hobby, anything, if you're a follower of Christ, Jesus has to play into that role somewhere, and obviously he's supposed to be like the main thing. So when it comes to collecting, you have to be careful to make sure that it doesn't become the main focus, the center of attention. And so I saw myself doing that a little bit with collecting, where my attention was probably more on cards than on God. And so, and the funny thing is that's always going to be like a battle, like an ongoing battle for me and for probably everybody else on the planet here that collects cards or that's into anything. There's always like this battle for your attention. And, so for me, it's cardboard. And so that's kind of one of the things how, God kind of played into the whole card collecting thing for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for me, I'm a part of the Jesus and Sports Cards Facebook group, that you are also a part of and that you kind of help coordinate. And I think one of the things that's come up for me when I think about my own interaction with my faith and the hobby is also just maybe the reputation or some of the conversations that come up with others who are collecting, the thought of how I interact with other collectors, the impression that I leave on them, and maybe even some of the conversations that I've been able to have with other people who think through integrity issues or other types of things that are kind of influenced based on my faith. And so I think, when I think about that question myself, I think those are some of the things that have also come up in addition to kind of the priorities topic that you outlined.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that the whole reason, and I want to apologize to you and anybody else out there that's part of the Jesus and Sports Cards group. I haven't been active in that, and it's just kind of been, I'm really great at starting things. I'm just terrible at following through on a lot of them. But the whole reason for it is there's a verse that says, that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And I think Jesus was saying that to his disciples. And so, just kind of dovetailing in what you're saying, through working through certain integrity issues and how we are to respond and to other people in this community, in our spheres of influence, whether they are believers or whether they're not believers. We are here to be Jesus to others. And what that means for me, and I think for everybody, is if you're a follower of Christ, it doesn't mean, like, forget the term Christian for a second. Don't be a Christian, be a Christ follower, be Jesus to somebody. And I think that actually carries a lot more weight than saying, for instance, well, I'm just going to be a Christian, because a lot of the world today, in America especially, if you think of the term Christian, you think of somebody that, they might hate homosexuals. They might, think Chick-fil-A is holy, and, all these other things, and so I don't think that, I think that kind of has been a problem for us as Christ followers, because that's not really what we should be about. We shouldn't be at the, on the picket line, so to speak. We should be modeling our lives as how Jesus lived, as shown in the Bible.
Yeah, definitely agree. And so, knowing that is a big part of who you are and has influenced your collecting journey, that's a topic that I wanted to touch on a little bit. Like you said before, some people may not like that. Some people may love that that's a topic that we covered, but it was something that I wanted to make sure we hit on in our conversation today. One of the other things that you've been involved with more recently is your podcast, and I was wondering if you could kind of tell me about that progression. What prompted you to decide to jump into the podcasting world and that type of thing?
Yeah, so it was funny because I was on a walk. Like, I walk in my neighborhood a lot at night, and I remember I was listening to a podcast, and it was somebody. I think it was Gary Vee, actually, and it's kind of funny. We're going from one polarizing subject to another, but but he's got some great business advice, and and I've really enjoyed it. But one of the things that he said was, like, if you want to start a podcast, why don't you just do it now? And so I go, that's a good idea. So I stopped it, and I literally looked for a podcast app on my phone as I was walking. I downloaded it, installed it, clicked record, and started talking. And it literally could be like the worst podcast in the whole world. It literally might be. I don't know. Because first of all, there's nothing that's written down. There is absolutely, nothing planned, and it's me talking while I'm walking. So you probably hear people will probably hear me out of breath as I'm walking and all that sort of thing. But it's just really kind of an outlet to allow myself to talk more about baseball cards and hopefully help others think through certain things, whether it be if they want to sell their own collections or the importance of trading, little side journeys that I've been on. And ultimately, it's just kind of another place for people to kind of tune in and, be able to listen to, background noise about baseball cards, I guess.
No, I don't see you promoting it all that much. It looks like you're really, it's hosted by Anchor. It's available on Spotify through their relationship, but I don't see it on Apple Podcasts. I don't see you promoting it a whole lot. Is there any kind of reasoning behind that?
Not really. I just don't have time. Literally like, for instance, let's say if I'm going to be doing a podcast tomorrow night, and gosh, let me tell you something. I'm doing literally everything wrong with this podcast. So I literally could say, okay, I'm going to be walking tomorrow night. And as I'm walking, I might say, you know what, now's a good time to do a podcast. I'm going to click record and I'm just going to start talking. And after 20, 30, 40 minutes, whenever I'm done saying what I have to say, I click save and push upload, and that's it. So certainly there could be a lot more promotion and marketing. And I know there's a lot of other tricks to be done, like to make sure it's regularly scheduled, to make sure it's planned out, to make sure there's some sort of a script and that sort of thing. And, I just don't have the time to do it, so this is kind of one of those things where it's like, if I don't do it this way right now, at this point in life, it's probably just not going to happen. So I'd rather have something than nothing.
Sure. Well, I know, one of the things I've enjoyed as I listened is it seems that you love to have kind of a focused, quote unquote, project for collecting. But one of the other things I've noticed is those projects sure seem to have a propensity to change a lot. Why do you think that is? What is it that makes you kind of seem to bounce from one focus to another? Or do you even feel that that's an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I think it's part of what makes collecting exciting for me. I've never been a person to hold something and just love it just to hold it, like for eternity. So
sure.
So for instance, like all the cards I had as a kid, I sold them, and I ended up buying some others. I started a Conseco collection, and I sold that. And then I built up my huge Conseco Super collection. I sold that, but I bought some back. And there's like a card I actually have in here that I bought in like 2016 or something, or 2017. I sold it. I bought it back. I traded it away, and then I traded back again to myself. So for me, the enjoyment is the hunt. And I'll tell you, like, after the Conseco stuff, for instance, I got really big into vintage cards. Mm-hmm. And I immersed myself in vintage stuff, like especially pre-war 19th century baseball. I love those cards. I love the history, love everything about it. A lot of the time period, especially when internet was certainly not a thing, but even really television, or even radio. And so I really love that. So what I would do is I started buying up a lot of stuff, and then I sold half of what I bought. And then I ended up selling everything else I had except for like 4 or 5 cards. But just recently, I think it was yesterday or so, I actually ended up buying back, 2 things. As number one is an 1888 Goodwin Champions Mike King Kelly. And then there's also an Allen and Ginter set that I bought back. So, it's just, I'm just doing what, trading cards were meant to be done, with like just trading back and forth. And I'm having the time of my life doing it.
What's your current focus right now?
I still pick up Conseco cards that I really like. I've got a suitcase of like super rare stuff that I just adore. Like, I love this stuff. And I've got my collection of wax, which is mainly from 1980 to 1990-ish. And, most of that stuff is going to be FASC, which, you might know what that is. A lot of people that are listening probably don't. So all of the wax boxes I have, for the most part, they're authenticated by a company named BBC Exchange. Mm-hmm. And so what they'll do is BBC Exchange, they're the authority of wax. So what they'll do is they'll take a wax box and they'll authenticate to make sure that the packs are not opened or anything like that, and then they'll seal it. But they take it a step further. If they know for a fact that the box comes from a sealed case, they will label it FASC, from a sealed case. So I have a nice little collection of those, but believe it or not, I've toyed with selling those. I have a nice binder of 90s inserts and parallels, and I've toyed with selling those. And it's just, but right now what I'm doing is I'm actually looking at a few other vintage pieces, like a 33 Gowdy Ruth, 34 Gowdy Gehrig, a few others, and, it's really, for me, the fun part, the best part of this hobby is really the hunt, I think. So, that's kind of what I'm enjoying right now.
In the book, you talk quite a bit about buying and selling collections. And from time to time, you just said, you mentioned that you look to sell some of the cards in your collection on the podcast, and that you've talked about how you've done that to help generate some of the funds to help fund your podcast. And I was, or not fund the podcast, but fund your collection. I was kind of curious about how much enjoyment do you have on the business side of the hobby?
Yeah, I love the whole process of it all. I really enjoy even the selling. I call it it's a game that I make out of this whole thing. It's a cardboard alchemy is what I've called it, where you buy cards, and whether you love them or you're just doing it for quote unquote business purposes, and I don't ever really like to use the business word in this sort of thing, because this is really all fun for me here. This is just a blast regardless. But I like recording all of my purchases in an Excel spreadsheet, and then selling them. And so if I can find out that I can sell everything for a profit and have cards left over, to me, I win the game. That's what I love doing. And so I try to help people work through things like that as well. And I want to be able to help people to do that also, because it's great. There's too many people, I think, that are sinking in their paychecks into these cards. Like for me, this is like a self-contained hobby. Like this doesn't really touch any other funds as far as, like quote unquote real life goes. Like I've literally bought and sold over the past 10 to 15 years, and I've used those funds to build up the Conseco collection. I sold the Conseco collection, used those funds to build up my vintage collection and get back other Conseco cards I like. So I want to try to help people to do that. But the number one thing that people need to realize in order to do that is they've got to buy the cards right. Yep. And when I say that, I'm saying that they need to purchase it at a price that can allow them to make a little money in the back end later on down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of my main focuses on the podcast as well as the blog also, is helping people kind of combine both that business side and the hobby side of collecting, so that you can generate a self-sustaining hobby, kind of like what you're talking about. And that's something that I enjoy as well. That to me personally, that is one of the fun things about the hobby, is when you can buy and sell some things to cover the cost of the things that you want to keep, and kind of have, like you said, almost like a game to it. That adds to the enjoyment for me too. And so I always like to hear from others who kind of have a similar mindset and enjoy that aspect too, because like you said, I think there, especially as we have more and more new people entering the hobby, or people who are returning to the hobby after a long layoff and are discovering a collecting world that is a lot different than what they left, learning some of those tips and tricks is only beneficial to strengthening the overall collecting base, I think.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people have problems in their marriage because of spending too much money on cards. And so if you can actually, it's so much better if a husband can say, hey, honey, take a look at what I bought, but guess what? I'm selling things too, so look at the money I've made. Yep. As well. I think that helps a lot. And so I'd like to be able to help people to do that. Like I routinely field questions that people email to me or chat with me about, and that sort of thing. I try to point people in the right direction a lot of times also, but more it's mainly just kind of like quote unquote teaching them to fish.
Sure.
And part of that also, by the way, is to be okay with taking a loss on cards sometimes. I've made mistakes. Like I've made more mistakes probably in the past like 3 or 4 months with buying and selling than I have ever before, but I still came out on top all right. It wasn't a problem, but it burns, when you lose money on a certain card. It's just, but unfortunately, it just happens. It happens sometimes. And that's kind of the nature of the beast. And so there's a lot of people that have the mindset, what, I paid $500 for this. If I can't get that out of my collection, then I'm just going to keep it. Like, well, no. Hang on a second. If the market says it's only worth $350, do you really want to keep $350 worth of cards that you were wanting to sell to begin with? No, use that $350 and focus it on buying something after being patient and educating yourself on prices and find something that could generate you more income with that 350. Don't just sit on the boat anchor that you have that's a $500 collection that you sunk your money into.
Where do you sell at? I assume eBay, but are there any other platforms that you sell on?
eBay is probably my least favorite place to sell.
Okay.
Just because of the fees and the taxes, and there's just so many hurdles now. But for me, I like the forums, I like Facebook groups, Twitter, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. There's so many places nowadays that you could sell cards on.
So where can people find you? Yeah, you've got the website, you've got your Twitter handle, but where's the best place to get a hold of you if somebody has some questions for you?
The best way is probably emailing me. It's my website's tanmanbaseballfan.com, and my email is tanmanbaseballfan@gmail.com. And so Twitter's tanmanbbfan. They didn't allow for Tanman Baseball Fan. It's too long, I guess. So I'm pretty darn accessible. Like on all of the forums, you can find me under the name Mushi. That's Moushi. So yeah, I mean, if you look for me, if anybody Googles Tanman Baseball Fan, I'll come up.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Tanner, for stopping in and getting a chance to chat a little bit. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, as you've been on my list of people to talk to for the last year or two, and so I'm glad we finally got a chance to connect.
Yeah, well, it's good talking to you. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. Thanks. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Let me know what you think at waxpackhero@gmail.com or reach out to me on Twitter at @TheMikeSummer. I'd love to hear what you think about that interview with Tanner. Get a hold of Tanner at the contact info he shared, and be sure to check out his book. I'll put a link in the show notes, and also I have an article at waxpackhero.com where I did kind of a book review on his book, Confessions of a Baseball Card Addict. I would also appreciate it if you checked out the other show that I'm a part of, the Hobby Hotline. It's on Saturday mornings live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. It's a little bit everywhere, but it's a live call-in show where collectors get a chance to call in and ask some of us hosts some questions. And so follow the show at Hobby Hotline on Twitter. There's a Facebook page, Hobby Hotline Facebook page. I'd love for you guys to check that out as well. That is all I have for you today, and so I will catch you next time.